everybody. Hi, everybody. Whatever time you're joining us, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, live, or in our archives, we do appreciate you coming to another special edition of Book Passages Conversations with Authors. Thank you so much for supporting us in this program. I'm Paula Farmer. I'll be your host today. And please remember for our audience that you can like and subscribe our YouTube channel. It only takes you a second, but it really helps Book Passage a lot. Also remember, we'd like you to be active participants in today's event by putting your questions and comments in the chat. I promise our authors will get to it, and we'd love to have your participation. As all of us watching this know or will know at some point in our lives, breakups happen, and they are often messy, hurtful, and hard to wrap your head around. Closure is not always a guarantee, and we can't all afford therapy or to lose friendships over talking it to death with them. Today's featured book, How to Heal from Breakup, is the non-judgmental friend you can share all of your feelings with and also go through some questions to help you through all the stages of a breakup and get you back up on your feet and know how to approach the next relationship. We have both the co-authors with us. And first, I'd like to introduce Carissa Potter. She's the owner-founder of People I've Loved, a social media presence. She has worked with Facebook, The Body Shop, Pinterest, Google, SF MoMA, which for those of you who aren't in San Francisco, that's San Francisco Modern Museum, and Wall Street Journal, and that's just a small bit of the list of her involvement in. In conversation with her is Vera Kachouh. She is a writer and brand strategist. She worked for many years as a content and marketing director in the Bay Area, helping establish the voice and tone of many notable brands and organizations, including Blue Bottle Coffee. If you live in the Bay Area, you know what that is, and San Francisco Art Museum. With that, I'm going to bring both of them onto our virtual stage and let them take this conversation away.
Thank you so much, Paula. Hi, Carissa.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to be here talking to you about our book, because this is our very first moment that we're actually celebrating the book together, I feel, since we live so far away, since it was published. So I'm really excited.
I'm really excited to be here too. And I know that I asked you to tell the story of how we came up for the book concept, but while Paula was introducing us, something came to me that was like a light bulb went off in my brain. I don't know if you feel this way, like making a connection just feels really good. But I realized that I feel like in some ways, I wrote this book to cope like with you leaving, like, I don't know if I've had a heart. I'm sorry, this is like a lot of pressure to put on you.
No,
and potentially strangers to be like, I don't know if I've had a heartbreak as intense as when you moved to Italy during the writing of this book. Yeah. And I think when Paula introduced it as a breakup book, it's actually titled How to Heal from Heartbreak. And I think that there's a lot of heartbreak is an interesting topic. And maybe can I ask you, Vera, how would you define heartbreak?
Oh God, that's such a good and very big question. Yeah, so I agree that the book is about breakups. And I think we can talk about, like, in a minute, maybe how we developed the concept together and when it happened, because it happened in a really interesting way, I think, at a particular moment. But the book is about breakups, but I think we also were processing like our love story, the love story of our friendship. when writing the book. And I did move very far away. I moved to Italy a year and a few months ago. But Heartbreak, I mean, you know, I think obviously it can take many forms. I think the longer one lives, the more sort of kinds of heartbreak one can experience. And we were particularly focused on the disillusion of romantic love, whether you were the one who was broken up with or the one doing the breaking up. But I do think that a lot of the questions and creative prompts that we came up with while writing the book are also useful or could be interesting for like dissolution of a friendship or grief in a bigger sense. So I guess my answer to the question, like, what is heartbreak? I think heartbreak is grieving. And it's a very active form of grieving because often, as Paula said in her introduction, you don't always get to have closure. You don't necessarily get to decide when or how it happens, or if you get to process to the extent that you want to process with the other person involved. But so it's grieving, and it like takes shape over time, and you do have to move through it, unfortunately. And it can be really difficult.
There's this quote that your therapist tells you in the book that I feel like is really controversial, but it's painful and kind of true. Can you tell the story about what your therapist told you when you were going through a pretty messy breakup with a very long-term partner?
Yeah, I think that therapist was really awesome, and said many great things. And I'm also now wishing like I had thanked her in the back of the book, because she's sort of woven throughout it. But I think the thing you're thinking of is she once told me, no one owes anyone anything. And is that the one you're thinking of, Carissa? Mm-hmm. And that is so tragic and so piercing, and also so real and true, I think. I mean, I maybe you can speak to this too, Carissa, like kind of like how you are in relationships. I feel like I've always been the kind of person who's like incredibly loyal and like wants to like kind of stick it out, get through things. And so I think, I was having this session with that therapist, and I was like, why didn't he this, or why shouldn't he? And she was just sort of like, no one owes anyone anything. And that's really scary, but it's also freeing when you think of what you yourself owe, or who you owe something to. Like at the end of the day, one of the things I had to learn through one of, several messy breakups was that the person I owed the most to was myself. And I hope that our book, I think you and I, we both talk a lot about how hard it is when you're going through a breakup to find a friend who's willing to, really listen as much as you want to talk about it. And hopefully that the book can be the friend who is still there when you're like, I'm still processing this.
So Vera and I met when we went to the no longer in existence school, San Francisco Art Institute in 2008. And for anyone who doesn't know, what SFAI has this sort of long relationship, a history of kind of performance art and social practice art, along with a sort of appreciation of relational aesthetics. And would you say it's like a kind of like a fluxus? I feel like I'm using all these terms that I don't completely understand because I'm not in that world, and it's been a long time since we were in school together. But yesterday when we were talking about, the recent interest points for us, we were talking about how this book in relationship to both of our art practices and also in relationship to contemporary art. And I was wondering if you could, Vera, talk a little bit about kind of situating why was writing this book, which is in some ways an activity book, but sort of maybe your expansive notions of what that might include and mean in the context of this moment.
Yeah, and after I answer that, I really want you to talk about some of your projects that deal with relationships, because I think they're really incredible. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that SFAIA is a very conceptual place, and I think you and I are both like come from that conceptual art community and education. And yeah, I mean, the cool thing, I hope the cool thing for people about our book is that in the end, the reader is the writer of the book. Like, we're there kind of like coaching along the way, but ultimately, like, it's something that it's a document that the reader is gonna create to map whatever grief, probably romantic love, grief, they're going through. And I mean, I think we're really influenced. Like, I always talk about Yoko Ono's Grapefruit, which is like a book of conceptual prompts that, like, in a sentence, like, she can transport you to some other world. I mean, I guess in the sense all writing can, but Yoko Ono's prompts are very like active, like, go look at this thing and then like think about a color, like, and they're just really beautiful in that way. But Carissa, I feel like you have made a career as an artist about like around the topic of love and relationships. And maybe this is a good moment to like speak a little bit about that, or even, the name of the brand, People I've Loved, has this like loss embedded into it. Maybe you can speak about like a couple of art projects, or what interests you about relationships and love and falling in and out of love.
I think for me, human interaction, I'm pretty obsessed with finding meaning, and figuring out how to define myself in space. And humans are just endlessly fascinating. And I think this sort of connection, it's sort of this chase of feeling good, or wanting to connect and to have, for better or for worse, I think when you connect with someone and feel understood, it's one of the best feelings ever. But also, having said that, I think I'm also instinctively drawn to the sort of bittersweet or melancholic emotions. And I think, like, I know this isn't answering the question about why or what projects I've worked on that I feel like are illustrative of my practice, but I think in this book, part of the sort of, I would say, core value for me, I won't speak for Vera, but was the sort of acknowledgement and allowance of embracing those emotions, which I feel like we're coming out of this moment where it feels really important to reframe everything in the positive. And I think for me, at least, I am a wallower. And if I don't wallow, I can't move through. And I wanted there to be, I think this book is the sort of companion that we wanted, or I wanted for myself when I'm sad. And I may be scared to talk about how sad I am, or having feelings that maybe I've been told that potentially aren't flattering, that I will still be held and loved and accepted, just because I'm a human, which is like a weird concept in Western cultures, I think. Vera, we have a couple questions, and I really want you to answer this one about the subtitle question, because I think that if I remember correctly, even though sometimes I feel like our work kind of
Brains are
comes
blended.
together, but
Yeah.
the subtitle, I'm pretty sure you came up with the subtitle.
Yeah, this is a really great question that our Paula just sent over. That the question, I'll read it out, is I love the subtitle of the book, or at least feel less broken. Can you explain what you mean by that exactly? So that is a great question. Thank you for asking. So, okay, so the book is called How to Heal from Heartbreak, or at least Feel Less Broken. And here it is. And I think, like, Carissa and Carissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were really dubious of the idea of healing ever being something that has a final end to it. Like, you were just talking about like the bittersweet nature of existence, and like trying to figure out giving meaning to everything. And I think for us, we really felt like we were not interested in making a book that was gonna try to fix someone or tell them when or how their grieving would end. And also that, like, I don't think, after, going through breakups myself, and also after writing the book, like, I don't actually think you ever really get over lost love. And I think that we were trying to like reframe like what it means to get through a breakup. Like, the goal is not actually perhaps to get over it, but to like find a way to incorporate the love that you felt and then the loss that you experienced into your life as you move forward. So maybe you can like put the puzzle pieces together in a different way. You might still feel like a shattered mess, but if you found some meaning in them and rebuilt some part of yourself through it, then you're less broken. You might still think about your ex, or you might still have the heartbreak. Does that feel true to you, Carissa?
Oh yeah, I feel like that was really beautifully put. I wanted to ask you, in addition to that, or to kind of talk about, because I feel like you really put a lot of thought and care into the structure and flow of the book. And I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on sort of the emotional roller coaster, and the meaning behind that.
Yeah, totally. This is related to this question too, because books, have front and back covers and beginnings and ends, and we were writing about something that we felt like doesn't have this finality. Like, you're not going to close the book and be like, great, like, I'm healed, done. I never have to think about that again. And so but because books have beginnings and ends, and there's like a certain amount of pages, like, in really helpful creative constraints in that way, we came up with a structure that we felt like it has to be linear, because you turn pages in a book as you're reading, but that you could dip in and dip out of. And that's a little bit itself broken. So the structure is, let me see if I can find the beginning. I think there's like clearly a beginning, because that's after the break happens. And that says we describe that as shock, a fresh cut, a new wound. And this page reads, studies suggest that emotional pain activates the same receptors in our brains as physical pain. Or to put it another way, you're not crazy, it actually hurts. And then a little asterisk in the bottom that Carissa has drawn that says, grief doesn't have a timeline, but you have to start somewhere. And then we have, like, we move through, like, I think there are like 3 middle sections that are sort of like, these are possible different ways you might be feeling along the middle. And then an end that is not really an end. And then the interludes. Do you want to speak a little bit about the interludes, Carissa? Because I feel like maybe, or like how we polled other people talking about heartbreak, that could be really interesting.
So I should say that, so this is the second version of
Oh yeah.
How to Heal from Heartbreak. The first version actually was something that Vera and I put together, but it was more of a cookbook. And I think the format was, when we had pitched it, the format was a little bit confusing because people, I know this sounds like weird to the logistics of things, like of people were like, do we put it in the cookbook aisle or the self-help aisle? And for some reason, like everybody was really hung up on that, which was interesting to me. But I think both Vera and I were, I'm not going to speak for you, but I am really happy with both versions for different reasons. But when we were working on the first version, we did a lot of polling on particular topics on Instagram. And every time we would post something about the pain of being broken up with, or the pain of a relationship sort of transforming, we would get just like hundreds of people wanting to talk about it and wanting to feel seen and validated, and like what they were going through was something very real. And I think that that was sort of a sign that not only were we like really fascinated with, or at least me, I'm very fascinated with how relationships kind of ebb and flow, and how our conceptions of relationships kind of transform our relationships, and how we have these ideas that like people are meant to stay in our life for the whole time, and like love will be enough. All of these things I sort of grew up on weren't actually reflective of the reality of my lived experience. So I think like it was really helpful to have the support and sort of the people. It seemed like people were really interested and were feeling like there was a need there to talk about this. And that's another reason we kind of made this into an activity book, because we wanted people to be active participants in it. Again, echoing what Vera said earlier, that you are actually the writer of this book. We're just kind of there to hold your hand in a sort of cheesy way. We have like a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Which
but I just want to add to that the interludes are sections that break up the sort of loose, non-linear, but it has to be linear in a way, structure of the book. The interludes are like stories or interesting anecdotes from other people who've gone through heartbreaks, and they were really fascinating to put together because and they're very soothing to read if you're in the midst of heartbreak and feeling really awful. Like we sort of like with a wink say in the book, like take comfort in the pain of others, but actually like one of the most tender and sad but like great things about reading those interludes is that like you feel like when you're going through a breakup, I think you feel like your situation is uniquely awful, and it is like, it really is so painful and the worst thing ever. But when you read the interludes and you read like other people's breakup stories, you like realize that they're so universal in a way, and everybody is like, you know, you see yourself in them in a way that is so comforting and connected. Yeah, okay, let's answer some of these questions. Carissa, which one do you want to?
Okay, Alice asks, how do you take the concept of the book and apply it to work you do with corporations and organizations? So I'm going to answer that. I'm going to take a volley. So this book itself isn't a project that we've worked with other corporations or organizations. This was just not just but it was a personal project that Vera and I really wanted to work on, and we're like very passionate about. for me, when I work with larger companies, it's really project specific. And so it doesn't necessarily, I can't imagine a company that would want, maybe there are companies out there that would like, oh, we would love you to host events surrounding Heartbreak, where people can, or we could, I mean, I could see it happening, but it just hasn't yet. For example, like lots of times when I work with like Google, for example, I've done a couple of murals for them in trying to create spaces that would be welcoming and inclusive and reflect some shared ethos that that we both hold. But I think I've been really fortunate, and I don't know if Vera would say this, or I feel like living in the Bay Area, it's a complicated culture here. And I think I've been lucky in the sense that I've been able to find value and support in larger corporations. And I'm grateful for that. But it's complicated for sure.
Okay, that's great. Can we take this? No, sorry. Sometimes I think I sound snarky when I was being really sincere. I think that was a great answer, Carissa. Let's take this. We have two other questions right now that I think are really amazing. I think let's start with this one. The question is, do you think all breakups are equally hard, romantic, friendship, and professional job, or do you find one harder than the other for people to bounce back from? Are there common threads, rejection, self-doubt, loss? That is a really good question. And I want to start the answer and then ask you a question, Chris, as a follow-up. So I don't think all breakups are equally painful, but I do think, not equally, but I think they are all painful. I think the level of pain corresponds, unfortunately, directly to the level of like love and commitment involved. So if you are, say, in a job that you have put your whole self into and there's like a difficult break there, I think that can feel incredibly painful. But lately I've also just been thinking that like everything that hurts in life comes from a core attachment wound. The more I read about and learn about attachment theory. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, Carissa, because I know you're really interested in attachment theory. And I say that as a way to open this idea that like there are common threads. So like, yeah, would you mind, like, is that too big if I ask you to take attachment theory? Or attachment
Yes,
wound?
but I will try, and I will try. So I think it might be obvious, but maybe it's not. Both Vera and I are anxious attachment people. And I think that there are three, I'm definitely not an expert on this, but there are three like different attachment styles. Anxious, avoidant, and is it stable? Secure? Is that
Secure, yeah.
But I think like I agree. I've been thinking so much about, there was this moment, and maybe this is tangential, where one of my daughter has cystic fibrosis, and one of her doctors was like, do you remember after like a painful procedure, was like, do you remember and then she meant this to be like a comforting statement, like, do you remember anything before you were the age of 5? Like, she's not going to remember this. And in my head I was like, well, that's like a very limited understanding of memory. And like how these sort of things, these sort of transgressions by people that she should trust and who love her are inflicting on her. But I think a lot about how these sort of core formations of understanding the importance of relationships are formed is fascinating. I also today, this makes me think of when I woke up this morning, I got an ad for Esther Perel, and the tagline was, tell me how you were loved when you were young, and I will tell you how you make love as an adult. And I think that, again, that's sort of speaking to like how these common threads, or these our early childhood experiences actually live with us even if they're beneath our consciousness.
Yeah, and I mean, basically, like, attachment theory says that like how you were loved when you were younger, like you said, Carissa, and the kind of attachment style you developed, which usually stems from childhood, it stays with you, so that when you're hurt later, it taps back into those core wounds. So in that sense, like, I do feel like all, breakups can be really devastating, because they may, I mean, depending on the circumstances, obviously, they may like hit on some really old wounds. We're not therapists, but that's just from my own therapy and reading.
No, I think that's I was like, oh, I should answer this question about if this book would be helpful to get through grieving the loss of an animal. And
Oh yeah.
I would say absolutely. But of course I would say that because we wrote it. But I think for me, the another thing that I am endlessly fascinated by is interspecies relationships. And this sort of love and connectedness that one can receive from all different types of beings. And when I think about that, and I think about I haven't lost any, I've been really fortunate that I haven't lost any human companions like permanently. But I have I had a very old dog for 18 years. And I lost him a couple of years ago, and it was beautiful and painful. And I think that sadness and devastation of losing a family member is very real as well. And so I think it's an interesting, like, why we as humans maybe make that distinction, like that should be different
Right.
um when I'm not sure, maybe that question also is more reflective of I mean, it's a beautiful question if I think about that in terms of uh assuming that you have lost a pet, that the beauty of that relationship and the honoring of that relationship would be to spend time with it. It makes me think of is it Pauline Boss
Yeah.
who coined the term ambiguous loss? I think
Yeah.
it's something along the
Yeah.
lines of like, if we have loved, or a quote of hers is, if we have loved, we will want to remember. And I think that this book is in some ways, I mean, in a lot of ways, giving you permission to remember in a world that wants you to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful, Carissa. And also, I think this question is really beautiful about if the book is helpful to grieve the loss of an animal. One thing I want to say about the book, in regards to that, is that Carissa and I thought a lot about like those early stages of pain and grief and how destabilizing it is. And I just personally remember feeling like I didn't know what to do with myself, and I literally did not understand like how to move through the day. Like the pain was so crushing in that way that it like, so we created some structures like to help you like get at what we sort of wanted ourselves, like somebody to sort of tell you like, you're in so much pain, like here's like one simple thing you can do for yourself today to like either get out of your head or like make sure you take care of yourself a little bit. And just like having a place, I think, to turn, that is not like a family member or friend, that is very sort of, it's just your space. And to do an activity, like even if it's really simple, I think just that on a like a very tactical level can be really helpful. when you're grieving.
Vera, I was wondering, when we were kind of talking a little bit about what we talk about you, there were a couple things that people kept asking you, about the book. And one was, you were getting a lot of like, is this book for women or men? And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that question and kind of what information that question kind of implies.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have gotten that question a lot, whether it's for women or men, and whether it's for dumpers or dumpies. And I mean, Carissa, I think we wrote the book to be for everyone, on either side of that spectrum. I think often, but not always, the person who is broken up with is the one who is having like maybe the most acute or immediate grief. That's not always the case, though. And it's not, I mean, we didn't think of it as being gender specific. I think there's some gender stereotyping bound up in the idea of journaling. I think that's like attributed to women or people who identify as women in a sort of unfair way. Like when I think about like someone who identifies as a man, like not feeling like journaling is something that they're supposed to do, that makes me find that really heartbreaking, because they feel like all it is like another way of encountering yourself. Yeah, do you have other thoughts on that, like that the genderedness or not of the book or the subject matter?
Well, I think that when we talked about it, I kind of noticed a paradigm shift in myself, because I think when my first book came out, I think 10, 12 years ago, and I got this question a lot.
Oh,
And I was like, it's for women. That's who it's for. I'm cool with that.
yeah.
And now I would say something drastically different. That I don't know, that we're in this really cool moment where in some ways gender is expanding rapidly, and our understandings of each other and how to interact with each other are really being broadened. And I think that for me, at this time, it was much more important to honor that inclusivity, and to make sure that, I think that when we had been going through drafts, to make sure that it wasn't directed at a particular person who would identify with being female.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think like our understandings of these things probably will change again in the future. And I think a lot of people have assumed that it is for female identifying people, but I don't think that was not our intention. And also I think that we intentionally made the drawings and the genders a bit more fluid in the writing. And also trying to make sure, I mean, a lot of the interludes are from, I think at least a few people have said like, oh, why don't you have more men? These are obviously women writing. But I think that that's also like Vera said this yesterday, where it's like actually saying more about, I mean, there's no real way to know the genders of the people who are writing,
Right.
and the like preferences and the pain. And we hope it is speaking to a more universal core disconnect that we're feeling. And I think like for me, I'm excited to, again, I think, not to be like, oh, I'm gonna butcher a Mary Oliver quote, to just sort of like lean into letting your body love what it loves, and
Yeah.
and taking information through that instead of what you're supposed to love.
Yeah, absolutely. We just got a message about it that says like which I totally agree with, and I think echoes what you're saying, Carissa. It's ridiculous. Men feel they can't talk about their feelings or write about them. This book is great for the man who is not comfortable sharing his feelings and loss, plus gender identity is fluid. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, it's fluid, and honestly, like I will say, like we have these in the book, we have these emotion, like body emotion maps, and there's an invitation to do them like 5 times. And I think I like thinking about the fluidity of gender and the fluidity of also like how you might be feeling in your body at any, given moment in your life. Yeah.
Paula, if you can definitely hear me, could you the comment or question that just came in, could you elaborate on that one? I would love to answer it, but I don't quite understand it. But maybe Vera, if you do.
Oh, the comment about the gender roles. Yeah, I was just kind of feeding off of that last one, which I did put forth as far as, I feel like in our society, men are put in these boxes.
Yeah.
And because of that, and historically, they feel like maybe they can't express their feelings through normal venues like just talking it out with a friend or a therapist or something or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was when you brought up the issue of, oh, but some men don't feel comfortable journaling. And it's like, yeah, it's just ridiculous that men allow themselves, maybe through history or society, to put themselves in boxes where they can't feel free
Yeah.
to find some way to express loss, whether it's a romantic loss or professional loss, or family loss, and
Yeah.
that's why I was saying that whether it's through gender identity or gender roles, like we
Right.
have these roles, like women are the ones to talk about their feelings or approach a subject. And I'm hoping now we're getting to the point where things are a little bit more fluid in that. And I'm just encouraging the audience that I think this book can speak to that, because even if you're still not comfortable talking about your feelings or loss, whether you be a man or identify as a man or woman or whatever, you can certainly get with yourself and go through this book and the prompts and things like that and draw comfort and healing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And that's what I kind of was so saddened by comments of like that sort of put the book in this like narrow category. I mean, it's also fascinating, but yeah, I think writing what you think and feel, that's such a human impulse, that it's available to everyone, and it's so important for healing. Yeah.
I guess we're almost out of time. Does anybody else have any questions or topics that they want to talk about? I think for I guess the one thing I kind of wanted to talk about was Vera, you had asked yesterday about there's an image in the book of
Yeah.
unfollowing.
I really wanted
And I
you to
think
talk about that.
this,
Can I show the image really quickly?
yeah, absolutely.
I can find it.
And so I think the reason that this really, how do I say this, is really resonated with a lot of people, whether it resonates with you or not, I can't say. But we have this sort of like intense need to know information all the time, and not knowing is maybe a sign of weakness, or but I think in some ways this ties back to permission and letting yourself know, like, is this actually really a good idea to stay in contact? I always felt this pressure to remain friends with people after a breakup, And it was really, I wanted to identify as the type of my self-conception as a person who stuck it out and who would remain friends and who could be cool, that actually I'm not. It's really difficult.
Actually, you need to hit that unfollow button quickly.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And just whatever works for you. I mean, if it works for you to continuously have information about other people, but my mind tends to compare and despair quite rapidly in a way that isn't necessarily always positive. Or actually, it's pretty predominantly negative, I guess. The other thing
yeah, we have there's like a section in the book about wallowing, and there's like a pass that you can give yourself to do, like, indulge in 1 hour of social media stalking. But then I mean, yeah, we're not being prescriptive about it, but I do think our prevailing advice would be to spare yourself the pain of following on social media accounts.
Yeah, but again, I think something we've said a couple times that is maybe too long to unpack right now is that Vera and I we're trained as artists.
Yeah.
And conceptual artists. And what gives one the authority to write a book on grief and loss? And I was wondering, I think I know what I would say to that, but I was curious, Vera, how did you find sort of the courage or the interest to focus on this and within your practice?
That is a great question. I mean, I have you, Carissa, to help me process things. And I think, I mean, that is honestly, like, might be what I would say, is that I like having a really good friend and collaborator to think through ideas is, I think the best thing ever. But I will also say that, like, I think having been through some breakups, that they just lingered, like the pain lingered, and I think it's, I was even talking to a friend recently who was saying that it was helping her process a breakup that happened, like, 10, 15 years ago. And I think, yeah, so I mean, what gives one the authority to write about it? I don't know. I guess I think anybody who's suffered has, in a sense, the authority to write about it. Because I don't think it ever really goes away. Back to the question of, like, feeling a little less broken. I think that's really one of the things that we're hoping that people feel.
I think also there's a relationship between authority and answers. And I can't say that this is both of our hopes, but I think it was our hopes that this would help you make space to find the answers for yourself and not necessarily give you a prescriptive answer. And also that, like, I think a lot of the book is about trusting your gut and your body, and that your experiences have meaning, and the exploration of what you want to focus on is, I mean, I think that there's like a gamut. I mean, if you are feeling there's an oppressive nature to sadness, that I do think it's helpful to have a trained professional.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we were really intentional about putting resources in the back of the book for information on the research that we did for the book, but also for mental health resources, if you were because this book isn't meant to, again, meant to heal it. And
Yeah.
I think that both Vera and I are humans, but who spend a lot of time thinking about this topic, and are genuinely interested in why humans feel things when they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and all of those are really good points. And I love, Vera, how you said what qualifies you, that you're humans that have been through breakups. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not purporting to be a professional therapist or whatever, but you're human beings, and with the common goal of wanting to help people get through
Mm-hmm.
loss and kind of exploring their emotions and things like that. And I tell you, I want people to really notice the book. Like, the aesthetics of the book are so great. And it's also very accessible because it's released in paperback. And I love that it's kind of small and it's like compact, and you can plop it in your bag or whatever. But because of the way it looks, because you're both artists, it's just very engaging and accessible. It's not heady and, elusive. And I
Mm.
also think because of the art, it also, as well as the content, it makes a great gift. So, I think it's great for people to have for themselves, because as we've all said, everybody's been through a breakup. Everybody's going to go through it, whether it's professionally, personally, romantically, a pet, loss is kind of, universal for human existence. And thank you so much to both of you, Carissa and Vera, for putting together this book and coming to Book Passage to present it.
Oh my
Thank you,
gosh,
Paula.
it was such an honor. I also want to say that it was really not to be like, it was really important for me to do this because again, I had this epiphany that writing this book helped me get through my separation anxiety of Vera not living like 3 blocks away from me anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's I think to do this, I don't know, it was the right time and the right place to have that revelation of like, oh, I need you and I love you, Vera, and I want you around forever.
I love you too, Carissa.
Thank you, Paula.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paula, for giving us some space to celebrate our book launch.
Yeah, no,
Really good to be
congratulations.
here, and thank you.
Congratulations. And everybody watching, you should get one for yourself and for somebody else. We're fast approaching that time of year when you're thinking of other people anyway. So Book Passage has plenty of books at our Corte Madera location and San Francisco, and you can always either come in safely, or you can pick up the phone, get a bookseller who will take an order, or go online. But we love when people support these events as well as the authors by buying the book. And ultimately, it supports Book Passage too. Thank you to our audience for participating and all the great questions. You got a lot of great audience questions.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. That's great.
Yeah. So until our next event, which please, we have a ton of events, not only for the month of November, but for this week and next week. So please avail yourselves to our website to find out if an event you could be interested in is online, or if it's in person in San Francisco or Corte Madera, or if it's a hybrid, because we're doing that these days too. But we keep everything updated on our website. So until then, thanks to our current guest authors, and we look forward to having another audience at many of our other events coming up. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.